There are moments in life when the soul feels a calling, even if the mind doesn't yet understand it. Moses was in the desert, far from power, far from recognition, far from the identity the world expected of him, when God spoke. And here appears a deep spiritual and psychological truth. Great awakenings are not born in noise, they are born in silence. Moses was not seeking protagonism, he was tending sheep. However, within him was a dormant identity, a purpose that had not yet been activated. From a psychological perspective, this teaches us that the mind often adapts to survival and forgets its true direction. From a spiritual perspective, we understand that God does not call those who feel ready, but those who are willing. When Moses sees the burning bush, something ignites within him. It is not just an external fire. It is an internal fire awakening consciousness, responsibility, and direction. In that instant, Moses begins to confront his fears, his doubts, and his internal limitations. And that's where transformation is born, when the calling is greater than the fear. Perhaps you are at exactly this point today, performing tasks, moving forward, producing, but feeling that there is something greater calling within you. The first great lesson Moses leaves us is this: God does not make mistakes with your process, even when you doubt yourself. This video is a journey of clarity, spiritual maturity, and inner direction. Because when God gives direction, the mind becomes ordered, the heart is strengthened, and life begins to move forward. Before releasing Moses for a great mission, God deeply worked on his identity. And this is a spiritual and psychological law that almost no one respects. Purpose without identity generates weariness, not fullness. Moses had experienced intense internal confusion. Born Hebrew, raised as an Egyptian, and spent years hidden in the desert. 3 identities, 3 stages, and none seemed complete. From a psychological perspective, this explains why many people feel lost even while being productive. When identity is not clear, the mind lives in conflict, energy is dispersed, and life becomes heavy. That's why God doesn't immediately give him the mission. First, he reveals who he is. And when Moses asks, "Who are you?" God replies, "I am who I am." That message is more than theological. It is a mental and spiritual anchor. Before asking what you are going to do, you need to understand who you are. Before chasing results, you need to align yourself internally. Moses learns that his worth does not come from the palace, nor from the past, nor from error, nor from the desert. His identity comes from God. And when identity is ordered, fear loses strength, confusion dissolves, and obedience becomes possible. This teaching is clear. God does not build the future on a broken identity. If today you feel confusion, tiredness, or insecurity, it is not a sign of delay. It is a sign that God is first working on your inner foundation. Because a firm identity sustains a great purpose. One of humanity's greatest mistakes is acting without direction. The anxious mind wants to move, produce, solve, but the spirit knows that not every action leads to progress. Moses learns this lesson from the beginning of his calling. God doesn't say to him, "Run." God says to him, "Go, and I will be with you." This is profoundly psychological. When action is born of anxiety, the body quickly tires and the mind becomes confused. When action is born of direction, even difficult steps generate inner peace. Moses wanted excuses. "I don't know how to speak. They won't believe me. I am not enough." But God doesn't argue with his fears. God gives him direction. Direction brings something powerful, focus. And focus organizes the mind, aligns energy, and transforms internal chaos into clarity. Many people today are tired not because they do too much, but because they do things that were not directed. They live reacting, not walking. Moses understands that he doesn't need to know all the details of the path. He only needs to obey the next step. And this is a central teaching. God does not reveal the entire path. He reveals the necessary step. From a psychological perspective, this reduces anxiety. From a spiritual perspective, this strengthens faith. If today you are paralyzed by fear or exhausted by excess, perhaps you lack not strength, you lack direction. Because when there is direction, even the desert becomes a path. Fear does not disappear when we understand purpose. Fear transforms when we decide to obey. Moses was not a man without fear. On the contrary, he was afraid of failing, afraid of rejection, afraid of confronting Pharaoh, afraid of returning to the past he had left behind. From a psychological perspective, fear arises when the mind anticipates scenarios that do not yet exist. From a spiritual perspective, fear diminishes when trust becomes action. God does not promise Moses the absence of difficulties. He promises his presence. I will be with you. And that promise changes everything. Obedience is not a blind act. It is an act of conscious trust. Moses takes trembling but real steps, and each obedient step weakens internal fear. Many people wait for fear to disappear before acting. But the order is the opposite. Obedience comes first, courage is born later. When Moses raises his staff, he does so not because he feels strong. He does so because he trusts the direction he received. And here is a powerful truth. Repeated obedience reprograms the mind. Every obedient act reinforces identity, strengthens faith, and breaks internal cycles of insecurity. If today you feel fear, do not condemn yourself. Ask yourself, what small act of obedience can I give today? Because it is not the absence of fear that changes life. It is the decision not to let fear rule. One of the most difficult tests of the spiritual process is not the desert, it is time. Moses receives a clear promise, but its fulfillment is not immediate. Between the word and the result, there is a process. And that process is not punishment, it is formation. From a psychological perspective, impatience arises when the mind wants to control the rhythm of life. From a spiritual perspective, patience develops when the heart learns to trust in God's timing. The people grow weary, complain, doubt, and Moses also becomes emotionally drained. Leading impatient people while awaiting a promise demands inner maturity. Here we learn something essential. Patience is not passivity. It is emotional resilience with purpose. God does not accelerate the process to calm the people's anxiety. God uses the process to transform the people's mindset. And Moses is molded on that path. He learns to listen, to intercede, to wait, not to react impulsively. Many people give up just before their character is ready to sustain the promise. Because receiving something great without emotional preparation can destroy instead of bless. This teaching is clear and firm. God doesn't just want to take you to a destination, He wants to prepare you to sustain it. If today you feel that the process is slow, heavy, or unfair, remember this: waiting is not a waste of time. It is internal construction. What is being formed in you now will sustain what comes next. True leadership is not revealed in applause, it is revealed under pressure. Moses did not lead an ideal people. He led people who were wounded, impatient, fearful, and often ungrateful, and yet he was called to guide them. From a psychological perspective, constant pressure activates primitive emotional responses: irritation, guilt, flight, or excessive control. From a spiritual perspective, pressure is the space where character is revealed. Moses faces constant criticism, betrayal, and complaints. The people doubt, complain, idealize the past, and question his leadership. And here, Moses learns a profound lesson. Not all conflict is a sign of failure. Many conflicts are part of the process. The leader who depends on approval breaks under pressure. The leader who depends on direction stands firm. Moses learns not to react from the emotion of the moment, but to return to the place of communion with God. This is a powerful key. Healthy leadership needs spaces of silence and reconnection. When pressure increases and the mind becomes saturated, Moses does not answer the people. He answers God first, and that preserves his inner balance. Many people abandon important positions not for lack of ability, but for emotional exhaustion, because they did not learn to lead from the inside out. This teaching is clear. You cannot sustain others if you do not first sustain your inner self. Uncertainty is one of the greatest challenges for the human mind. The mind wants guarantees, security, control. But faith grows precisely when those guarantees do not exist. Moses walks with the people without maps, without clear routes, and without visible certainties. He only had a promise and a constant presence. From a psychological perspective, uncertainty activates anxiety and fear of the future. From a spiritual perspective, uncertainty is the ground where trust is strengthened. When the people see no water, they doubt. When they see no food, they complain. When they see no way out, they despair. And Moses learns that to trust is not to deny difficulty. It is to decide not to let difficulty govern the mind. God does not remove all obstacles from the path. God manifests in the midst of them. Here is a profound teaching. True trust is not born when everything is clear. It is born when we keep walking even without clarity. Moses advances step by step, day by day, sustaining the people when collective faith weakens. And that constancy transforms uncertainty into spiritual experience. Many people give up just when the process enters a phase with no visible signs. But silence is not absence, it is preparation. If today you are living through a period of uncertainty, remember this. When you don't see the way, God's presence still guides your steps. Because to trust is not to see first. It is to move forward even when you don't see. Moses' last great lesson is not about power, miracles, or external leadership. It's about humility and surrender. Moses guides the people for years, but does not enter the promised land. And here is a truth difficult for the human mind to accept. Fulfilling purpose does not always mean receiving the reward as we imagine. From a psychological perspective, the ego seeks recognition and control. From a spiritual perspective, maturity is revealed when we accept to let go. Moses understands that his mission was not to possess the promise, but to prepare others to reach it. That requires deep humility, accepting that God is the center, not us. And this teaching is powerful. True greatness is not in arriving, but in obeying until the end. Moses dies seeing the promise from afar, but with the certainty of having fulfilled his calling. Many people get frustrated because they want immediate, visible, and personal results. But God works in generations, not just in moments. Perhaps you are planting today what others will harvest tomorrow. And that doesn't make you less. It makes you part of something eternal. If this message resonated with you, it's because you are in a phase of direction. And direction is not improvised. That's why I want to invite you with clarity and firmness. If you need mental order, spiritual direction, and decisions aligned with God, the ebook 7 Days of Direction with God was created exactly for this moment in your life. It's not just reading, it's a guided path day by day to align mind, heart, and purpose. Confusion tires, direction liberates. And when God directs, life moves forward.